is if you raise the foreign language proficiency of a country, the migration probability of high-skilled workers are going to react much more than the one of low-skilled individuals. That's why by raising the foreign language skills of a country, you can induce, and this is the theory, a brain drain. Why this question is also interesting from a social welfare maximization point of view. You can think that this is interesting on how to raise individual utility of high-skilled individuals by teaching them foreign languages and raising their migration probability. And on the same time, this is going to increase the migration of high-skilled individual, leading to potentially positive or negative welfare effect on the stayer. That is still an open question in the literature, the one about brain drain and the effect on stayer. And we are interested in understanding the cause of brain drain. That is a phenomenon that drew much attention on economics lately. So clearly, for a language proficiency and migration decisions are endogenous. So if I want to migrate on a certain country, I'm going to start, first of all, studying the language of this country. So in order to assess causally the effect of foreign language proficiency on migration decision, we need some kind of as good as random variation to foreign languages. And this is what we are going to do in this paper. We're going to exploit a setting, a particular setting where a share of Albanian population has been as good as randomly exposed, conditionally unobservable, to Italian television for more than 20 years. And we are going to study the effect of this exposure on Italian language proficiency, and then on the migration probability of individuals depending on their human capital. And we are going to assess that the effect on migration probability of a human capital individual is going to precisely increase Italian language proficiency. How we are going to do this? We are going to deal with the two main obvious channels through which a television exposure can affect migration probability, that are from the literature in information and belief. And we are going to show that our results of the effect of Italian television exposure on migration probability are robust also to some tests where, by conditioning on having a relative in Italy abroad, we can study a set of individuals that are already informed and, let's say, with appropriate belief, and we are going to show that our results are robust to this kind of test. So a preview of the results. We showed that Italian television exposure raised the proficiency of Albanian by almost 5 percentage points. That is a seizable effect if you think that is 110% of the average knowledge of Italian in Albania back in the time we have the measure, and we increased the migration probability. We observe Italian television exposure increasing the migration probability of a human capital individual by almost 20 percentage points, and that is parallel by an effect of migrating precisely to Italy of 15 percentage points. For what concerns low human capital individual, we observe no effect on migration probability of television, but we observe a redirection effect, let's say. So low human capital individual, 3 percentage points, more likely to migrate to Italy instead to a different country from Italy. So for the low human capital individuals, there is no people changing decision as a consequence of Italian television exposure from not migrating to migrate, but the one who decided to migrate, a small share of them redirect their migration decision toward Italy. So we assess that, as I'm going to show, our robust are a result our results are robust for controlling to other channels through which Italian television can affect the migration probability of high human capital individual. We interpret our finding as precisely the effect of foreign language proficiency on brain drain. So we contribute mainly to the three strands of literature. We contribute to the literature on the cultural determinant of migration. There has been an some observational studies showing the association between cultural distances in often measured as language proximity and migration flow. And in this sense, we claim we bring the first causal evidence on the effect of language proficiency on migration. And we contribute to the literature on the determinants of brain drain, and adding to the studies the role of information, different return to skills, and also cultural proximity by showing precisely the effect of foreign languages on the migration probability of a skilled individual. And finally, we contribute to the literature on media exposure on economics. There has been some studies showing the effect of television exposure on migration, but studying as mechanism, information and belief in particular. And we are first one to study the effect that can go through foreign languages that we think is relevant in particular nowadays, where foreign media exposure like Netflix is likely to affect, affecting the English, for example, foreign language proficiency. So the roadmap of the presentation, I'm going to start by discuss a bit of the historical background of Albania, then describe the data collection, discuss the identification strategy, and then we are going to the result on language proficiency and on migration, and I'm going to discuss how we can account for alternative mechanism that we discussed earlier, and I'm going to conclude. So, after the Second World War, Enver Hoxha and the Albanian Communist Party took power in Albania. And among many other characteristics of this long-standing regime in Albania, they completely isolated the country. Immigration was forbidden, and internal migration was controlled, in which sense there was no housing market, and people were not going to strategically relocate to a municipality or to another. There was absolutely no access to any foreign media and culture. In 1985, Enver Hoxha, the dictator, died, and the regime lasted 5 years until 1990, where it came to an end pretty abruptly. And for the interest of this paper, Albanians were in particular able to issue passport and free to migrate, and also free to migrate internationally as well as internally. And by 2000, Albania experienced one of the most phenomenal migration episodes in relative term. 25% of the Albanian population migrated abroad, and in particular many to Greece and to Italy. So I tell you about this country that were completely isolated with the rest, with respect to the rest of the world. However, there was a tear in the wall. In 1957, RAI, that is the Italian Public Broadcasting Company, built a transmitter in Puglia, that is southeastern region of Italy, that just across the Adriatic Sea with respect to Albania. And only because of the distance between the transmitter and Albania, the signal unintentionally reached Albania. And in particular, 10% of the Albanian population was exposed to the Italian television signal. So you could ask yourself, were they able to watch Italian television? It was precisely the case. Albanians from beginning to the 70s, television sets start to be widespread in Albania. And in particular, according to our data, in 1990, 75% of Albanian household had a television set. And this television set, according to many historical accounts, were able to capture Italian television, in particular the signal from this precise antenna. Albanians indeed watch intensively Italian television. First of all, because Albanian television was on air only for 4 hours a day, while Italian television was on air 24/7. And we had countless of historical records about Albanians watching Italian television precisely during the communist regime. And in particular, and we're going to use also for the rest of the presentations and on these historical sources, on top of the all the many references of history, contemporary Albanian history that discuss this societal phenomenon of Italian television watching during communist regime. At the beginning of the 90s, where all the Albanians were migrants were arriving in the shore of Italy, there has been an Italian journalist that, speaking with these Albanian migrants, discovered the story of Albanian watching Italian television and sampled 311 of them. And they were precisely reporting this account of watching Italian television in Albania with their own television set. So this situation is we think a great set for causal inference. In particular, the Italian transmitter reached Albania unintentionally, and until 1990, self-selection into treatment was absent, so people couldn't doing any strategical internal migration, and international migration was forbidden. So conditional on the distance to Italy, to the transmitters, to the port, and ruggedness and elevation of the terrain. And in the very same district, these are all variables that correlate both with signal exposure and variables such as migration cost and cultural distances. We claim that until 1990, exposure to Italian television in Albania was as good as random, and we can identify the causal effect of the exposure on the variable of interest. So we need a data collection effort, as you can imagine. We link 3 different data sets. First of all, we got from RAI, that is the owner of the transmitter in Puglia, the Italian television strength in Albania at 100 × 100 meter resolution. And we exploit data on the internal migration history of individuals, and so we constructed our treatment as the share of the municipality where people were living between 1970s and 1990s that were exposed to Italian television signal. So imagine if a municipality was exposed for 10%, the idea is that there you had less chance to be exposed because we don't know precisely where in the municipality an individual was living. And while if you were exposed 90%, you had a higher chance of being exposed to Italian television. We got the data from QGIS and NESA to build the distance and topographic characteristic of the municipalities. Particularly, you think that elevations matter both in terms of signal reception and also migration cost. And then we exploit 2 surveys of the World Bank in 2005 and 2008 in Albania, that are the Albanian Living Standard Measurement Survey that I'm going to discuss now. So there is the main sample, what we are going to call the base sample, that is made of 30,000 individuals spread over 350 municipalities, that are a sizable amount of municipality in Albania, that is composed of 480 municipalities over 36 districts. We keep only individuals that were aged at least 5 in 1990 at the end of the Albanian communist regime, and so could have been exposed to Italian television during the period of the regime. And from this sample, we exploit the internal migration history of the individual, as I said, the education level of individuals, and variable on the self-reported foreign language proficiency for Italian, English, Greek, and a question that is other languages. In particular, to be clear, individuals were asked in 2005 and 2008 if they knew these languages, and in particular, if they knew these languages in 1990, precisely at the end of the regime. Additionally, individuals were asked to list all their siblings and in which country do they live, and if they live abroad, when they migrated. And then they were asked about the demographics of these siblings. So with this question, we built an additional data set where we can have Albanians that are both in Albania or are abroad, can be in Italy or any other country, and we're going to build our data set where we can observe migrants and non-migrants, and we're going to call the sibling sample, and this made almost of 50,000 individuals. We are going to assume that the sibling, this sample, were living in the same residence of the individual that is listing his or siblings in 2005-2008. This is a reasonable assumption in our setting, as Albanian was an agrarian country, and where households were tend to live all in the same municipality. And we are going also to assume that education is strongly correlated across the SIP. Why? Because we have the education level for people in the base sample, and we are going to proxy the education in the sibling sample with the education of the sibling that is listing of the siblings. So we are going to assume that if an individual is from a family and he got education, and the education of the siblings that he is listing is correlated. And finally, we have an additional sample that maybe we're going to discuss less for the sake of time, where we are going to use as robustness and to have a different sample to confirm our results. The head of the household was asked to list all the individuals that are out of the household, in particular children and spouses that left the household since 1 year. And they were asked about the country of residence, and in particular the foreign language proficiency in 1990 as well for these individuals. And we have almost done. Yes? Is there a question? No?
I don't think so.
Okay. So maybe a graphic representation can help to understand how this data work. There is an head and spouse that are asked to list, as you see, in the sibling. The sibling can be all in Albania, or no, sibling can be abroad and can be also to Italy. And the education and the location of living in 1990 is the proxy using the data on from what we call the base sample. So a bit of descriptive statistics of our sample for our interest. As you can see, in 1990, at the end of the regime, Italian were the most widespread language in Albania, and more than Greek, English, and also the category other languages. As I discussed in the historical section, internal migration rate before the end of the regime was very low, and this is a yearly migration rate, so we have almost 0.3 percentage point internal migration rate. The international migration rate before 1990 was almost zero. By historical account, 6,000 Albanians managed to escape the regime, and this is pretty what our numbers are speaking about, while the share of migration in the sibling dataset is almost 20 percentage point, and in the children and schools out of the household, it reached 50 percentage point, the migration after 1990, and Greece is the main migration, and second come Italy. So, as you are going, I think, to expect. This is a map of Albania divided by municipalities and with the exposure to Italian television. As you can see, there is a meaningful variation of Italian television exposure at the same distance to Italy. In particular, this is something that we have time. These are the decile of the distance to Italy or to a port, and this is the exposure to Italian television, and you can see that across almost the first 8 decile of the distribution. So there is not a perfect collinearity or almost perfect collinearity, what I want to show here, between the distance to the ports, to Italy, to migration cost and exposure to Italian television. So we are going to use classical specification in media and economics literature, where we use ordinary least square. And as I told you, we regress the variable on interest on the signal exposure of the municipality, and then we control for the distance and topographic controls. And we add also some individual controls such as age in 1990 and gender and sample fixed effect, that is if you're sampling in 2005 or 2008. And the beta identify the causal effect of the treatment on the variable of interest, and the standard error at cluster at the municipality level, at the treatment level. So these are the effect of Italian television on foreign language proficiency. As you can see, there is a strong and significant effect on Italian, while there is no effect on the other foreign languages, English, Greek, or other languages. In the column 5 and 6, we run this exercise of subsetting the regression for a family having a television in 1990 and the end of the regime. Even if having a television can be thought of being endogenous by what I mean, that if you were exposed to Italian television, you could have been more willing to ask to get a television during the regime. However, I'm not going to in deep. The probability to have a television in this very controlled economy can be found to be partially orthogonal to Italian television exposure. Anyway, what we want to show here that people that were exposed to Italian television and during the regime and had actually television set are the one learning Italian, while the one who didn't have a television and they were exposed, they don't. So it's actually the fact to be able to be exposed to Italian television that is going to increase the Italian language proficiency. We can run the same exercise on the sample of children and spouse and get exactly the same, very close results. And one thing that we can perform in the children and spouse is to compare individuals who are abroad with respect to individuals who remain in Albania. Well, in the base sample, all the individuals are, by construction, individuals are in Albania at the time of the survey. And we can think that migrants are as good at least as good as the non-migrants in learning foreign languages. And so what are the numbers you see for the base sample are actually a lower bound of the real effect of Italian television exposure on foreign language proficiency, because migrants, if they would have been present in the sample, would have displayed a stronger effect. And in the children and spouse data set, we see precisely this. So for the sake of time, let's move to the results on migration. The first 3 columns is the...
Damiano, sorry. Related to the previous table, I was wondering if it was possible that people are starting to buying more TV because they know that there is more interesting TV signal, like not only 4 hours a day, but 24 hours a day, etc. So like if you have an information on the number of TV before and after the signal exposure or something like that.
Thank you very much for your question. Sure, it's endogenous to have a television to the fact to be exposed to Italian television signal. We do not have information on household having a television set. The information we have is in 1990. We know by historical account that television started to be widespread in 1970s. And in some sense, we do not claim this the result on subsetting for having not having a television are causal estimate of the effect. They that we think they bring to the analysis because we could have an immediate concern. You know, these are recall measure in 2005. I was asked, did I know Italian in 1990? And you could have been influenced by, for example, return migrants from Italy or other facts happening over these periods. However, the fact that the one that answer the new Italian are one who had the television set in 1990, that is an information that is very hard to, no, the mistake is not affected. This is, we think, bring additional evidence to our claim of Italian television exposure affecting the Italian language through television exposure, and not to phenomenon like being closer to coastal area, return migrants, and so on and so forth. So this is, but yes, unfortunately, we would like to have many, many more data on Albania during the communist regime that we don't. There is a statistical book in 1975 that they did, but it's all about aggregate measure. And, so this is the effect on the migration probability. And the first three column is abroad. And you can see if we look at the full population, we see a null effect. Or if we split the sample between high-skilled and low-skilled, we can see that there is a very, very strong effect for high-skilled individuals. And this, we think, is in accordance with the idea of the skill-language complementarity. And the exposure to Italian television really affected the one who could benefit for increased communication skills. If we look precisely at Italy, we can see that the effect on high skill is coming from people migrating precisely to Italy, almost all. Then we can see that for low skill, there is a positive effect that is parallel by a negative effect on migrating elsewhere. And so while for high skill individual, there is an increase in the migration probability, and this increase translates in almost all translated in migration to Italy. For the low skilled, there is no effect, and there is only an effect of redirecting people who already decided to migrate. So if how many minutes I have? 10 minutes. Let's try to go into what would be my first question.
Yeah, you have 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
But what I would personally ask, seeing this result, what about the other effect of Italian television exposure on migration? Could be that high-skilled individual looking at Italian television got costless information about jobs and economics opportunities in Italy. And also it could be what has been called also in sociological literature that Italian television exposure on Albanian produced the Italian dream, if something like this can exist. Apparently, yes. So the idea that a skilled individual would have overestimate the return to migration, looking at Italian television, and this or a mix of these two channels is what is producing our result, and this is not about languages. So we want to what we're going to address this potential other mechanism. We are going to show that our results are robust to individuals that should not rely on television for gathering information about migrating to Italy or for forming their belief on return to migration to Italy. And in particular, we're going to study individuals who already have a connection in Italy at time of their migration decision. So put it simple, I know someone in Italy, a relative or friends. The information I will get from her or him are of a greater value than the one I can get on television. Okay, so if you are going to see an effect very similar on this set of individuals, we think that this is going to confirm that our results are going really through communication skills. So we have an information about individuals having a relative or a family friend in Italy in 19 or abroad in 1990. This is, we claim, strongly and exogenous. Why? Because in order to have this family friend or relative in Italy, this individual is someone that is belonging to the Albanian migration before the Second World War, because then the country was completely sealed for 45 years. And this time elapsing from the migration decision of this person or of the father or mother of this person, and now is breaking the correlation between the family characteristics of the migrants and the characteristic of this relative abroad. And this is an exogenous. However, there is a small sample of individuals having such a connection in 1990. And so it's nicely exogenous, but is imprecise. And so we also resort to another strategy to study individuals that for which they have already a sibling migrated at the time of their migration. So I am migrating, and my sister, my brother already migrated to Italy between 1990 and the time of the survey. This is bring a good sample size, however, is endogenous. Having a sibling already migrated is endogenous. So we are going to model the selection for having a sibling already abroad using or the relative or the family friend abroad in 1990 as an instrument for having a sibling abroad at time of migration, or the gender of the older sibling, as there is little one we can confirm in our data, then having a firstborn as male is as a consequence having a smaller family. And having a smaller family is going mechanically to affect the probability to have a sibling already migrated to Italy. So this is a table with, let me take some minutes to explain what is in this table. In the column 1, it's simply ordinary square for the sample of educated individual, and we add to our main specification the relative in Italy in 1990, and we can see that there is a positive, strongly significant effect on the probability of migrating, of having a relative in Italy in 1990 on the probability to migrate to Italy. Interestingly, this effect is smaller than being exposed to Italian television signal. And so this is also give us the idea that the television exposure had a really seizable effect, and that is stronger than having a relative in Italy. In the second column, we interact the television signal with the relative in Italy in 1990. And the idea is that television exposure was about information or belief. Then there should be substitute television signal and having a relative in Italy, and their interaction term should be negative. And this is not the case. In contrast, we can see that is positive, is imprecisely estimated, but is strongly positive, leading to the idea that they are complementary. So that there is not much what's inside the relative in Italy into the television exposure. Then we run our battery of result where having a sibling abroad from the column 3 to 5 is modeled through having a male as firstborn or a relative abroad or a relative in Italy. Here, we do not subset for the sample of university graduate our sample, because Ekman selection model is demanding in terms of precision, and we are simply interacting television exposure with a dummy for being educated. And we can see that this interaction term is significantly and strongly positive, and this is going to give the result on the heterogeneity of the effect between low skilled and high skilled. So the idea is that even we look at a sample of people that are already informed. Thank you. And that they can gather information in Italy and have kind of precise belief about the return to migration, we are going to our results still holds. So why? No, while maybe we should think, but if you know the history of television exposure in Albania, this is what we think it's is about languages. But why this is information channel doesn't look to play a major role? We have, as I told you, there is this survey of Albanians arrived to the shore of Italy in 1990, but this Italian journalist, and he asked the list of the shows Albanians were used to watch, and so we have this list, and in particular, only 7% of the shows they were used to watch when in Albania were about head count of an information account, while the have an information content, while the most of the shows were about entertainment, purely entertainment show. And so the amount of information they could have gathered from the television about economic opportunity in Italy doesn't seem very relevant. On top of this, we have a survey in 2005 and 2008 on return migrants in Albania, where the return migrants were precisely asked about what has been useful as information provider for finding a job and where to go in Italy at the time of migration, and only 1% answered TV as an information provider. That was precisely listed as an option, while most of the people answer it was a relative or a friend. And for what concern the belief, we want to stress out that 70% of our sample is abroad since more than 4 years. And so these are people that had the time to correct their belief and make an informed and decision about migration. And in this time, they would have returned if this was a story about an overestimation of return to migration. So to conclude, we exploit a natural experiment to show the effect of foreign language proficiency on brain drain. We showed that foreign media exposure affect the migration probability precises to through foreign languages, and we think this is a contribution on the literate or the cultural determinant of migration. And we also show that foreign media exposure can increase foreign language proficiency. That I think that is something to deem relevant nowadays, where foreign media exposure is foreign media can be accessed easily. The welfare effect of the brain drain and stay here, and so welfare evaluation of this phenomenon is still debated in the literature, and there are evidence on positive and negative effect, and we leave to our future to a future paper the effect of this brain drain on Albanian stayer. So thank you very much for attending this presentation, and I hope all comments and questions are absolutely welcome.
Thank you very much, Damiano, for this very clear presentation. I will now let the floor to Mattia for 5 to 10 minutes commentary. So please, Mattia, go on. You have the floor.
Sure. Thank you. So I will take the floor. Can you all see my slides?
Not for
okay.
now.
No?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So first of all, I want to say that I really enjoyed reading this paper. Damiano and Anatol are very careful writers and very good researchers. They really identify every detail, and they cover extensively the material and the research question that they have in mind. So I really enjoyed the paper. So thank you. I want to start with this quote by David Card, just to make you realize how important and debate are language barriers in determine the integration in the labor market, and particularly the success. And as Damiano points out, the effect, the penalty for not knowing a foreign language becomes higher with your degree of skills. So the main question that I think this paper is addressing is, should we promote plurilingualism? And this paper, Damiano, has in mind to answer this question, how it can quantify the effect of language proximity on migration patterns, because language proximity would imply a lower language barrier. For sure, there is a huge problem of endogeneity with the fact that in answering this question, language proficiency correlates with unobservability. And so far, there wasn't much research into estimating a causal effect. So Damiano and Anatole furnish a unique framework that I think this is your key novelty that I really, really like, that allows to disentangle language proficiency from ability. In their paper, they exploit as good as random variation in TD, as Damiano explained, on a very nice framework in terms of which were the restriction on migrating. So you had exploit this variation of Italian TV on Albanian grounds in a period where internal migration, so strategic migration, was not possible, to then observe the outcome once also the migration restrictions were abolished. And I think this is very nice. And what this paper does answer specifically the question, are Albanians exposed to TV more likely to migrate due to improved language skills? And the sub-question that this paper answer are that the TV improves language proficiency in Italian, and that TV improves likelihood of migration. So I have suggestions that are all minor. So these are not comments, just suggestions, because I think the paper is very strong. You identified a lot of alternative channels. Indeed, the main concern is that you would like to have an IV, but your data set does not allow to estimate this IV. But then you discuss carefully the exclusion restrictions. So I think this is still very nice. Some suggestion I have in mind, the first one that really popped up in my mind was if this transmitter is really the only one that reached Albania, also in the context of the competition that started between Mediaset and Rai after, I think, the 1975 or the 80s, or perhaps if between 1957 and 1990, Rai also put another transmitter, perhaps in Lecce or Brindisi, that may have reached also the coast. So I think this is something you should look into, because may confound your estimate. And in this case, I think it is attenuating your estimate if this is the case. So this goes positively for you. And the second thing is what happens when you exclude urban municipalities. So I understand that the signal is as good as random, but perhaps a reader that is not into this literature and that is not very well acquainted with these terrain propagation models doesn't know whether in an urban area the signal may be stronger than in a rural area, and therefore this may confound your estimate, because if individuals that are living in urban areas also have a stronger signal, that you don't know if the effect is driven by the fact that these people, since are in urban area, perhaps have a higher endowment of wealth or of other type of channels and networks, and then they have a higher propensity to migrate. So this is just a robustness check I would add in appendix. And finally, another suggestion is that I would love to see, to complete your paper, an answer to the question that whether should we promote plurilingualism or not. I think in your paper you are addressing the question of brain drain, but I think this question comes afterwards. Before also you're talking about plurilingualism. Is it positive or negative? How does it improve the condition of the people that are more know more about Italian? I would like to see something more in these terms. And these are my main suggestion. I have some very small minor comments instead that may help you frame better some aspects of your paper. The first one is that I'm not very acquainted with the literature. So when you speak about this threshold of 55, and I don't even know how to read the measurement, I think we need a little bit of explanation for why you're choosing this threshold, and why are you inputting as treated like pixels that have these thresholds. And also, I was also wondering why using the share. I mean, I see of using the share of the municipality, but why also not the average signal? So I think I would understand something in this term. For the dynamics, I think is also interesting. You mentioned in your paper that you have the year of migration of these individuals. So it would also be interesting if you could, I mean, maybe make two groups, like after short, after long, individual that migrated just after 1990 or after, way after 1990, because this also may help you in your story, right? Because maybe individuals that migrated before are really due to the treatment, as if we go way longer in the future, then many other things can happen and people can always attack you on these fronts. And finally, very quick, I think it's nice. I've seen in the literature on random treatments doing this thing in which you regress your observables on your treatment variables, and essentially you look at the F-test or conditional, or you regress conditional on the variables that you think make exogenous your measurement, and you assess the F-test. That should tell you whether a measure of how good at random is your treatment identification. Then I'm worrying about the geo attributes you introduce in your regression, because what I understand from terrain propagation models is that they already take geography into account. And I'm wondering whether if you remove geo, you have the same estimate, but you improve your standard error. Maybe this is something you can really quickly check, or maybe this is not needed because also depends on the model they're using in RAI. And finally, maybe do Italian proficiency by skill. Also just to maybe may help you your narrative or not. I didn't make too much thought about it, but you're so consistent in your robustness that I thought this maybe some very quick add-on to your paper. And that's it. I want to iterate that it was very difficult to find. I hope I found some helpful comments because it was very difficult, because it was very robust, very well written. So well done, Damiano. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Mattia, for these great comments. Damiano, do you want to answer a few comments, or just wait for other questions, maybe?
No, well, I would love to get as much as question possible and comment. Let me thank you, Mattia, and I would like to, if you can send me your slide of the discussion, it would be great to you. Also, the initial citation, we could put the citation from the at the very beginning of our paper. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now if anyone has other questions or remarks, please feel free. Yes, Shobit, you can go on.
Yeah, hi. A really great paper. I mean, it's a great identification. But I do have some questions. Maybe you might have it in the paper, and but you can maybe give me some clarification on that. So the first thing would be if the region where the signal reaches is actually the region which is wealthier, and because of that they have more access to move abroad once they get the opportunity, rather than the regions which are far away from Italy and they are not able to. So not just that they don't get the signal, but they're also the poorer regions. So it might be just the case that just because they're richer and they have better, not just wealth, but also human capital, and that's why they just migrate to Italy once they get the chance. So if you have like this regional differences, then it might just add to your story. The second point was something on the language proficiency. So obviously I mean, it's also like maybe you have it in the paper, but I haven't seen it. So, but just because they are getting this the signal, and so they are watching TV, and so their proficiency is improving. But can it also happen that these are the regions where they are more exposed to Italian culture, and so they already, like, for example, some people they migrate, some Italians they came there, and because of that they got to learn the language, and so they have more proficiency just because they are close to Italy as compared to the regions which are far away. And so those regions which are closer to Greece, they move towards Greece, and the ones which are closer to Italy, they move towards Italy. So just if you have this data on where people move to and from where, that will just also give us some insight on, is it just the regional differences, or is it actually the availability of this TV that is helping them to move. Yeah, those were my comments. Thank you.
Damiano, I think that you can maybe answer now before taking a question.
Okay, so thank you very much for your comment. What I understand is that what you're interested in is to see in particular robustness, no? That people that are not too close or too far, and this correlate with both signal exposure and migration cost. And in this sense, we do have robustness in the paper, where we remove coastal area, and we have also, and I have also one in the slide, you see, where we remove all the non-treated area on the very east of the Albania, and all the on the very west, so the very close and the very far, and these are robust. For what concern your point on wealth, is we could have the measure. Well, problem is that in some sense it's a strength of our setting. Albania was a communist regime, so people were, and it was also the fourth poorest country in the world in 1986 of the most. So there were not this differential of wealth. We built a measure of wealth that we used for some robustness, that is the housing dimension per person, and we can see, for example, if our results are robust in the same category. This is something we can do, and but we can also subset maybe for moving area close to Greece and looking at area close to Italy, and to do this robustness and also to control. So thank you very much for your question. For what concerned the initial discussion, I take the point again. I for sure need to be in the paper more clear about the setting of the transmitter. Why we do use only one transmitter? And is so I see that this is need to be explained better in the paper. This is the most powerful transmitter in the area. So even if we would have collected all the other transmitter in this area, all the signal would have belong inside this one big transmitter, and this is what we get from RAI, because it's very high, it's very powerful, and all the signal. So we thought that to collect on protocol is difficult to collect Mediaset transmitters that are smaller. We should ask Mediaset, but this we do not really know how we would have used this fact that people were exposed to, on top of RAI, also to another transmitter, and so we use this one very transmitter. And this is the reason why we do not delve into collecting data on the other transmitter. For what concern urban and for what concern urban area, we have the data in urban area. We build the data in urban area, so indeed we can check if this is the differences between being exposed and living in rural area, within the difference between exposed in urban area. And for what concern the policy discussion, so I see, because there is always this tension between what are you telling us that it is bad to teach people a foreign language for the country, and this is something we do not very much like to hear. And my answer for the time being is not really, because we do not the effect on stayer of brain drain is not set to be negative. We do not have evidence on immigration literature about this phenomenon. There having a positive impact on stayer through many channels, but I will maybe we to add on a bit of more discussion in the conclusion about this and what we think about this. And for the rest, I can thank you for the advice on the F test, and why we did build the measure of exposure as the share of the municipality exposed with respect to the average of the exposed municipality. Is the reason is that because we do not know precisely where a person, no, this is going to proxy for being exposed or not. And because what we code as being exposed is not, because this is maybe something I wasn't clear. We didn't use any model to predict we didn't use a model, terrain model, to predict the signal strength. We had the precise signal strength. We got exact the one from RAI that is not only made by a model, but is confirmed by on the ground data. And so we know exactly in a certain 100 times 100 meters square if they were able to watch or not. And so that's why we prefer on the measurement and terror to tackle the one are you really exposed. So I can only thank you very much for being here. And if you have any comment and so on, please send me an email, and let's up to meet again in this small world of migration.